Emma Wilson stood frozen in the master bedroom of the Manhattan penthouse, her hands trembling as she folded a simple cotton maternity top into the lone suitcase laid open on the bed. The evening light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the imported marble floors. She could hear footsteps approaching, not the heavy, familiar stride of her husband, but the sharp click of stilettos. Vanessa Crawford appeared in the doorway, her tall, slender frame silhouetted against the hallway light. In her manicured hands, she held Emma's favorite maternity dress, a pale blue wrap dress Emma had purchased just last week for her upcoming baby shower. "You won't be needing this anymore," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with quiet triumph. With deliberate slowness, she produced a pair of scissors from behind her back and sliced through the delicate fabric, the sound of cutting cloth deafening in the silent room. Emma lunged forward. "Stop it! That's mine!" But Vanessa was quicker, sidestepping her and pushing her against the wall with surprising strength. "Careful," Vanessa whispered, her face inches from Emma's. "You could lose much more than just a husband and a home." Emma's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly, 6 months pregnant with the daughter she and Michael had planned for, prayed for. Michael Thompson appeared in the doorway then, his expensive suit wrinkled, his once commanding presence diminished by shame and cowardice. "Don't, Vanessa," he said weakly, making no move to intervene. Vanessa looked at Emma, at the protective hand over her belly, at the unshed tears glistening in her eyes, and she laughed. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a sharp, crystalline sound, utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. It echoed off the marble floors and through the cavernous space of what had once been Emma's dream home. That laugh broke something inside Emma that Michael's betrayal hadn't. It cauterized the wound with the hot iron of pure humiliation. But beneath the pain, something else crystallized, a quiet, cold resolve. "This is not the end of our story," she whispered to her unborn daughter. Not by a long shot. 5 years earlier, Emma Hayes had been a bright-eyed literature graduate with dreams of writing the next great American novel when she met Michael Thompson at a book launch in Tribeca. He wasn't supposed to be there, a tech entrepreneur at a literary event, but his company had sponsored the venue. He'd approached her as she stood examining the first edition Hemingway display, offering insights that surprised her. "Most people assume I only read quarterly reports and stock projections," he'd said with a self-deprecating smile that transformed his serious face. Emma had been immediately drawn to his intelligence, his intensity, and the way he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts on modernist literature. He was different from the aspiring writers and academics she usually met, grounded, focused, and refreshingly direct. When he asked for her number, she gave it without hesitation. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Michael, then 30 and already making waves with his startup Thompson Tech, pursued her with the same determination he applied to his business ventures. She fell for his ambition, his unexpected kindness, and the vulnerability he showed only to her. Within a year, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the Hamptons. The penthouse on the 80th floor of a gleaming Manhattan high-rise had been his wedding gift to her. "A place in the awe for my star," he'd whispered as he carried her across the threshold, with its panoramic views of the city, custom Italian furniture, and a library he'd secretly stocked with first editions of her favorite novels. It had seemed like a palace in the clouds. Michael's star had continued to rise. At 38, he was now the CEO of Thompson Tech, featured in Forbes's 40 Under 40. His innovations in security software earning him both wealth and industry respect. Emma had willingly stepped into the role of supportive wife, accompanying him to galas and industry events, charming his business associates with her warmth and intelligence. His parents, the distinguished Dr. and Miss Thompson, had welcomed her into their fold, though their approval always seemed contingent on Emma's ability to fit into their world of old money and carefully cultivated connections. They had been pushing for grandchildren almost from the wedding day. "When are you two going to give us a grandchild?" Dr. Thompson would ask at every family dinner. The Thompson name needs to continue. Their life together played out perfectly on social media, vacations in Santorini, charity galas in couture gowns, intimate dinner parties with Silicon Valley elites, all carefully curated for Michael's 2 million Instagram followers. Emma had embraced it all, believing she was living a modern fairy tale with a man who adored her. But fairy tales, as Emma was learning, often concealed darker truths beneath their shimmering surfaces. The first hairline fractures in their perfect life had appeared shortly after Thompson Tech completed a major acquisition of a rival security firm. Michael had become distant, working later, coming home with his mind still clearly at the office. When Emma suggested they start trying for a baby, as they'd always planned to do in their 5th year of marriage, he'd hesitated. "Maybe we should wait another year," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "This acquisition is taking all my focus." But Emma, approaching 32 and hearing the faint tick of her biological clock, had persisted. Michael eventually relented, and 3 months later, she'd surprised him with the positive pregnancy test. His reaction had given her the first real chill of foreboding, a flicker of something like panic in his eyes before he composed his features into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's wonderful," and he'd said, hugging her stiffly. As her pregnancy progressed, the cracks widened. Michael's late nights became more frequent. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume clung to his suits. A second phone appeared, which he claimed was just for international business. Emma found herself checking his texts when he was in the shower, scanning credit card statements for unexplained charges, lying awake until he came home at 2 a.m. claiming server issues at the office. She buried her anxieties beneath baby name books and prenatal yoga classes. She redecorated the guest room into a nursery, painting the walls herself when Michael was too busy to help. She told herself it was just the stress of the acquisition, the pressure of being Michael Thompson. She told herself things would improve once the baby arrived. She was a fool. That evening, she had prepared Michael's favorite meal, coq au vin, its rich aroma a stark contrast to the sterile air of their designer kitchen. She'd worn the new maternity dress, arranged her hair the way he liked it, chosen the wine he preferred, though she couldn't drink it. She was determined to reconnect, to bridge the growing distance between them. Michael came home later than usual. He barely glanced at the carefully set table, the flickering candles, her hopeful smile. "We need to talk, Emma," he said, pushing away the plate she'd set before him. His voice, usually so confident and commanding in boardrooms, was flat. Emma's heart began a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. "Okay," she whispered, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. Michael didn't meet her eyes. He stared out at the city lights as if they were business metrics on a screen. "I'm not happy," he began, a classic cowardly opening. "We're not connecting anymore. Things have changed." "Things have changed, Michael," Emma said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I'm carrying your daughter. We're about to become a family. Of course, things have changed. They're supposed to." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were cold, distant. "That's just it. Emma, the baby, this whole domestic life. It's not what I want anymore. I thought it was, but—" He trailed off, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "What you want," Emma's voice rose. "What about what I want? What about what we plan together?" "I've met someone," he said, the words dropping like stones into a deep well. "Her name is Vanessa Crawford. She understands my world, my pressures. She's vibrant. She's not your pregnant wife," Emma finished for him, the words tasting like ash. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Emma could hear her own blood roaring in her ears. She felt the baby kick, a tiny insistent flutter, as if she knew, as if she was telling her mother to be strong. And then a sound from the hallway, a soft click of a door followed by the tap, tap, tap of stilettos on the imported Italian marble. Into the dining room stepped a woman who looked like she'd been sculpted from Instagram filters and ambition. She was tall, impossibly slender, with raven hair and lips that were just a little too full to be natural. She wore a red dress that seemed poured onto her body. It was Vanessa. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a look of bored triumph on her face. Ma and Ma had seen her before, in the background of tech industry events, an aspiring model known for her strategic relationships with powerful men. There had been whispers about her being a high-end escort, rumors about a Saudi prince who had kept her in a Park Avenue apartment. Looking at her now, Emma wondered how long the affair had been going on. How many nights Michael had left their bed to go to her. "I told you to wait in the study, Vanessa," Michael said, his voice a mixture of annoyance and resignation. He wasn't in control anymore. She was. "I got tired of waiting," she said, her voice a low purr. She looked Emma up and down, her gaze lingering on her belly with unconcealed disdain. "So, is the little wifey getting the picture?" Emma felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She pushed herself up from the table, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She looked at Michael, her husband, the father of her child, and saw a stranger, a weak, hollow man who would let this woman stand here and mock her in their home. "Get out," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Both of you." Vanessa laughed. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a sharp, crystalline sound, utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. It was the sound of victory, of contempt, of a predator enjoying its kill. That laugh broke something inside Emma that his confession hadn't. It cauterized the wound of his betrayal with the hot iron of pure humiliation. She was laughing at her pain, her swollen body, her shattered dreams. "Oh, honey," Vanessa cooed, stepping further into the room. "I'm not the one who's leaving." Emma's eyes locked with Michael's. He looked away, ashamed but resolute. That was her answer. This was her house now. Something inside Emma went cold and still. The tears she felt burning behind her eyes retreated. The trembling stopped. There was only a sudden, chilling clarity. She would not cry in front of them. She would not beg. She would not give them the satisfaction. In that moment, Emma realized she wasn't just facing a betrayal, she was facing deliberate cruelty. This wasn't just about Michael's weakness, it was about Vanessa's calculated malice. And something in Emma, perhaps the protective instinct of a mother, perhaps the resilience she'd inherited from her own mother, refused to be destroyed by it. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the dining room. Vanessa's laughter followed her, bouncing off the ridiculously expensive, soulless art on the walls. Emma went into their bedroom, her bedroom, and pulled a small suitcase from the top of the vast walk-in closet. Her hands moved with a strange, detached efficiency. As she packed, memories of her childhood surfaced unbidden. Her parents had divorced when she was 8. Her father, a charming but unreliable salesman, had left her mother for his 20-something secretary. Emma remembered her mother packing just like this, calmly putting necessities into a suitcase, while Emma and her sister Olivia watched, confused and frightened. "Why are we leaving our house?" Mom, young Emma had asked. "Because a house is just walls and a roof, Emmy," her mother had answered, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Home is where we're safe, where we're respected. This isn't that place anymore." Her mother had rebuilt their lives from scratch, working 2 jobs to keep them in a decent school district, never speaking ill of their father despite his sporadic child support payments and broken promises. She had taught Emma and Olivia the most important lesson: never let a man define your worth. Now Emma channeled that same quiet strength. She ignored the designer clothes, the jewelry boxes, the symbols of her gilded cage. She packed 3 pairs of maternity leggings, a few soft t-shirts, her prenatal vitamins, and the worn dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre from her college days. She packed the little gray elephant she had bought for the nursery, and at the very bottom, she placed a new leather-bound notebook and her favorite fountain pen. The notebook had been a gift from Olivia for Emma's 32nd birthday. "For the novel you're always talking about writing," her sister had said. Emma had once dreamed of being a writer, had been praised by professors for her insightful essays and evocative short stories. Somewhere along the way, that dream had been set aside for the role of Michael Thompson. Emma wheeled the small suitcase toward the front door. She passed the study, The door was ajar. She could hear their voices, low and intimate. She paused, her hand on the handle of her bag. So much drama, Vanessa was saying, a sigh of faux exasperation in her voice. Is she gone yet? I want a glass of champagne to celebrate our new beginning. Soon, Vanessa. Just give her a minute, Michael replied, his voice placating. Emma pulled the door open. They were standing by the window. Michael's arms wrapped around Vanessa's waist. She was leaning back against him, a triumphant queen surveying her new kingdom. She turned her head and saw Emma. The smirk returned. Finally, she said, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Don't make a scene. Don't make this complicated. Just disappear quietly, or things could get very difficult for you. Emma said nothing. She held Vanessa's gaze for a long moment, memorizing the casual cruelty in her eyes, the smug curve of her lips. She let her eyes drift to Michael, who looked away like the coward he was. She wanted to remember this moment. She needed to. Pain, she knew even then, could be powerful fuel. She walked out of the penthouse, closing the heavy oak door behind her with a quiet click. She didn't slam it. She didn't scream. In the silent, carpeted hallway, with the sound of Vanessa's laughter still ringing in her ears, she made a vow to her unborn daughter. They think they've won, she whispered to her belly. They think this is the end of our story, but we're going to write a new one. And I promise you, darling, we will write the last chapter. The elevator descended 80 floors in a smooth, silent glide, a journey from one life to another. When the doors opened onto the grand, impersonal lobby, the doorman, a kind man named George who had always saved the fluffiest croissants from the morning delivery for Emma, rushed to help with her single bag. Going out for the evening, Miss Thompson, he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. He saw her face, her lack of a coat despite the autumn chill, the small, lone suitcase. He knew. Longer than that, George, she said, managing a weak smile. And it's Wilson now. Emma Wilson. He nodded, a flicker of understanding and sympathy in his old eyes. He'd been the doorman here for 30 years. He'd seen the pattern before. Younger wives replaced when they no longer fit the image powerful men wanted to project. He hailed a cab, held the door for her, and squeezed her arm gently as she got in. You take care of yourself, Miss Wilson. You and the little one. That small act of kindness was the crack in her dam of composure. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering tower behind, the tears finally came. They weren't loud, histrionic sobs, but a silent, steady stream that tracked paths down her cheeks. She cried for the husband she thought she had, for the family she thought they were building, for the naive girl who believed love was enough to anchor a man like Michael Thompson. She gave the driver an address in Brooklyn, her sister Olivia's address. Olivia Wilson was Emma's opposite in every way. Where Emma was quiet and accommodating, Olivia was loud and fiercely protective, an artist who made a living selling beautifully chaotic abstract paintings online. She lived in a third-floor walk-up that was the antithesis of Emma's penthouse. It was cluttered, colorful, and smelled of oil paint, roasted garlic, and life. When she opened the door and saw Emma standing there, suitcase in hand, face blotchy and tear-streaked, she didn't need an explanation. She simply enveloped Emma in a hug that felt like coming home. That son of a bitch, she muttered into Emma's hair. I'm going to kill him. I'll use my palette knives. It'll be artistic. Emma let out a watery laugh. Get in line. The first few days were a blur of grief. Olivia set Emma up in her spare room, which doubled as her studio. She slept on a futon surrounded by canvases of vibrant, angry reds and deep, sorrowful blues that seemed to mirror her own internal landscape. She barely ate. She stared out the window at the bustling Brooklyn street, feeling like a ghost. The world was moving on, laughing, yelling, living, while hers had stopped. The hurricane within her was relentless. Waves of anger would crash over her so intense she felt she couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream, to throw things, to march back to that penthouse and claw that smirk off Vanessa's face. Then the anger would recede, leaving behind the vast, empty ocean of grief. She would curl up on the futon, her arms wrapped around her belly, and weep until she was exhausted. He didn't just betray me, she confessed to Olivia one night. He brought her into our home. He let her laugh at me. He just stood there while she threatened me. Olivia's eyes flashed with fury. What do you mean, threatened you? Emma recounted Vanessa's words. The scissors, the destroyed dress. Jesus, Em, Olivia breathed. That's not just cheating. That's sadistic. I should have seen it coming, Emma said, wiping her eyes. The signs were all there, I just didn't want to believe it. Don't you dare blame yourself, Olivia said fiercely. This is on him, 100%. Michael tried to call. The first time his name flashed on Emma's screen, she felt a jolt of pathetic, misplaced hope. Maybe he'd realized his mistake. Maybe he wanted her back. Olivia snatched the phone from her hand. What? She barked into it. There was a pause as she listened, her face growing darker by the second. No, she doesn't want to talk to you. What's there to talk about? You made your choice. It's wearing a red dress and has the moral compass of a sewer rat. Another pause. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hurt your feelings? Listen to me. You pathetic excuse for a man. Don't you ever call this number again. A lawyer will be in touch. Have a nice life with your blow-up doll. She hung up and blocked his number. Then she blocked Vanessa's social media accounts from Emma's phone. Poison, she said, handing it back. We're on a detox. It was Olivia who saved Emma. She didn't coddle her or offer platitudes. She sat with her in the silence. She brought her tea and toast when she couldn't stomach anything else. She dragged her out for walks, forcing her to breathe the crisp autumn air and feel the sun on her face. Meanwhile, the real world continued its assault. Michael had, as predicted, frozen their main joint account. Emma's personal savings were meager. She'd put most of her pre-marriage earnings into their down payment on the penthouse. She hired a divorce lawyer, a formidable woman named Rachel Morgan, recommended by one of Olivia's art world contacts. Rachel was all sharp angles and sharper intellect, with a reputation for going for the jugular in high-profile divorces. He's going to play hardball, she warned Emma during their first meeting in her stark, minimalist office. His offer is insulting. He's offering a one-time payout that wouldn't cover a year's rent on the apartment he kicked you out of. He's citing irreconcilable differences and painting you as emotionally unstable. His lawyer, Bradley Peters, is a shark. I have nothing, Emma said, the familiar feeling of powerlessness creeping back in. You have his child, Rachel said, her eyes steely. That's not nothing. That's a lifelong responsibility he can't walk away from. We'll fight for proper child support, alimony, and a fair division of assets. It will be a battle. The legal battle was a slow, grinding war of attrition, affidavits, financial disclosures, motions. Bradley Peters, Michael's lawyer, used every trick to delay and intimidate. They questioned Emma's fitness as a mother, hinted at her history of emotional distress, and tried to paint her as a gold digger who had been unhappy long before Vanessa came along. Every legal document, every condescending letter from Peters was fresh pain, but now Emma had a place to put it. She would read their lies, feel the surge of rage and injustice, and then she would go to her desk and pour it all into her book. One evening, about a week after she'd arrived, Olivia found Emma sitting in the dark, staring at the blank wall. You can't just sit there, Em, she said gently, flicking on a lamp. He's not worth you fading away. The baby needs you. I know, Emma whispered. I feel so powerless. Olivia, he has everything. The money, the power, the lawyers. He took my home, my life. That woman, she laughed at me like I was nothing. Olivia sat down on the futon beside her. So, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? I'm pregnant. I have no job. And my savings are in a joint account that I'm sure he's already frozen. That's the practical stuff. We'll figure that out. I'm talking about you. What happened to the Emma who was going to write the next great American novel, the one who saw stories everywhere? Emma scoffed. She married a millionaire and got stupid. No, Olivia insisted, her voice firm. She got sidetracked, but she's still in there. You know what they say? The best revenge is a life well lived. I don't want a well-lived life, Emma said, the anger flaring up again. I want revenge. I want him to hurt the way I hurt. I want her to know what it feels like to be humiliated. Olivia's eyes lit up with a familiar fiery spark. Okay, good. Use it. She stood up and rummaged through Emma's suitcase, pulling out the untouched leather notebook and the fountain pen. She placed them in Emma's lap. What's this for? Write it down. Olivia said, write it all down, every last ugly detail. Write about the cold penthouse and the fake smiles. Write about his lies and her cruelty. Write about how it felt when she laughed. Don't write it for anyone else. Write it for you. Get the poison out. Emma stared at the notebook. It seemed like a flimsy shield against the towering fortress of Michael Thompson's world. But it was something. It was hers. That night, for the first time in a week, she didn't cry herself to sleep. She opened the notebook. The first page was terrifyingly blank. Her hand shook as she uncapped a pen. What would she even write? Her life was a tragedy, a cliché. The rich husband, the pregnant wife, the younger mistress. But then she remembered Olivia's words, get the poison out. She didn't start at the beginning. She started with the sound, laughter. She wrote Ursine. It wasn't the warm, bubbling sound of joy. It was sharp and cold like glass shattering on a marble floor. It was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at my heart. The words started to flow hesitantly at first, then with a desperate, purging urgency. She wasn't crafting sentences, she was bleeding onto the page. She wrote through the night, the only sound the scratching of her pen and the distant wail of a city siren. She wrote about the weight of his secrets and the lightness of her morals. She gave them different names, of course. Michael became Julian Croft, a titan of industry with a soul of ice. Vanessa became Sable, a predator in designer heels. And she was Eleonora, the quiet wife who saw everything. She wasn't just writing her story, she was taking control of it. She was taking their ugly, cruel reality and reshaping it into her own narrative. 3 days into her writing, Emma made a disturbing discovery. She had pulled out her old phone to look for some contact information and found an app she didn't recognize. After some research, she realized with horror that Michael had installed surveillance software on her phone. He could read her emails, see her browsing history, potentially even track her location. That controlling bastard, Olivia hissed when Emma showed her. Who knows how long he's been spying on you? The revelation left Emma feeling violated all over again, but it also made her more cautious. She abandoned the laptop Michael had given her, switching entirely to writing by hand. Her paranoia extended further. She began checking for surveillance cameras whenever she entered a new room, started taking different routes when she went for walks, became guarded about what she said in public places. If he's watching me, then he knows I'm writing, she told Olivia, a new fear gripping her. What if he tries to stop me? Let him try, Olivia said defiantly. You're not his possession anymore. But the threat became real a few days later when a package of baby items Emma had ordered online was returned to the sender with a clear message. Be careful, Emma. Michael's friends are watching. The intimidation worked. For 2 days, Emma didn't write. She stayed inside Olivia's apartment, jumping at every sound, expecting Michael or his proxies to appear at any moment. The fear began to overshadow her anger, and with it came doubt. Maybe I should just take whatever settlement he offers, she told Olivia one night. Get away from New York. Start fresh somewhere. He can't reach me. Is that what you really want? Olivia asked. To run away, to let them win. Emma placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. I want what's best for her. I want her to be safe. And what lesson do you want to teach her? That when powerful men hurt you, you should just disappear, or that her mother was strong enough to stand up for herself? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, a thunderstorm raged, rain lashing against the windows of the Brooklyn apartment. The power flickered, then went out, leaving them in darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning. In that darkness, with the thunder rolling overhead like the voice of some ancient deity, Emma made a decision. She found her notebook by the light of her phone and wrote by its glow, "I'm not writing this just for me anymore." She wrote, "I'm writing it for my daughter, so that one day she'll know her mother wasn't a victim, her mother was a survivor." As the sun rose over Brooklyn the next morning, Emma had filled another 20 pages. The storm had passed, both outside and within her. A new determination had taken its place. She wouldn't just survive this. She would transform it into something powerful, something that would make Michael Thompson and Vanessa Crawford regret the day they decided to make her their enemy. She wasn't just Emma Wilson, abandoned wife. She was Emma Wilson, author, and she was about to write the story that would change everything. Emma's life, once dictated by Michael's social calendar and business functions, now revolved around two things: her growing daughter and the burgeoning world within her notebook. She would wake up, eat the breakfast Olivia left for her, and then sit at her sister's rickety wooden desk, the one stained with a rainbow of old paint, and write. The story poured out of her. It was fiction, but it was forged in the fire of her truth. She fictionalized the names in Michael's specific business, changing his tech empire to a ruthless private equity firm. But the emotions, the settings, the dynamics, they were real. She wrote about the suffocating opulence of the penthouse, which she called the glass spire. She wrote about the performative philanthropy, the backstabbing that passed for friendship among their circle, the casual cruelty veiled in polite smiles at society functions. And at the heart of it all was the relationship between Julian Croft, Michael, Sable Vanessa, and Eleanor Emma. She delved deep into the psychology of it, exploring how a man like Julian, so powerful in the boardroom, could be so weak in his own home, easily manipulated by a woman who mirrored his own narcissism. On a cold November morning, Emma found herself stuck on a scene where Julian explains himself to Eleonora. She couldn't get inside Julian's head, couldn't understand what would make a man destroy his family for someone like Sable. Her writing had hit a wall. "You need a break," Olivia said, finding Emma staring at her notebook, pen motionless. "Let's go to that cafe down the street. The change of scenery will do you good." Emma hesitated. She'd been avoiding public places, paranoid about Michael's friends watching her. "Come on," Olivia insisted. "You can't hide forever. Besides, they have those chocolate croissants you've been craving." The cafe was warm and busy, filled with the comforting hum of conversation and the rich aroma of coffee. They found a small table by the window, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt almost normal, just another pregnant woman having breakfast with her sister, until she overheard the conversation at the next table. "Did you see that article about Michael Thompson?" a woman was saying to her companion. "Apparently he's engaged to that model, Vanessa something. They're all over page 6. "Isn't he still married to someone else?" her friend asked. "I think so, but who knows with these tech guys? They trade up wives like they trade stocks." The women laughed, oblivious to Emma sitting mere feet away, her face draining of color. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. "Ignore them," she whispered. "They don't know anything." But Emma wasn't listening. A realization had hit her with stunning clarity. She finally understood Julian Croft, Michael Thompson. He wasn't unique or complex. He was a cliché, a predictable man following the most basic script of male power and privilege. And in that banality, she found the key to writing him authentically. She pulled out her notebook right there in the cafe and began to write feverishly. Julian Croft wasn't born a monster. He was made one, shaped by a father who measured love and achievements in a culture that rewarded him for taking what he wanted. He didn't destroy his family out of malice, but out of a fundamental inability to value anything that didn't reflect glory back upon himself. The women at the next table glanced over curiously, but Emma didn't care. She had broken through her writer's block. She had found the heart of her antagonist not in his exceptional villainy, but in his ordinary, recognizable human weakness. Back at Olivia's apartment, Emma's breakthrough fueled a new phase of research. She couldn't directly ask Michael about his childhood or psychology, but she could piece together a picture from other sources. She dug through old interviews he'd given to tech publications, finding telling quotes about his upbringing. She searched for information about Dr. William Thompson, Michael's father, finding articles about the renowned surgeon known for his groundbreaking techniques and his notoriously demanding personality. "Listen to this," Emma said to Olivia, reading from her laptop. "Dr. Thompson expects perfection not just from his surgical team, but from his family as well," says a colleague. "His son Michael was famously sent to boarding school after bringing home a B+ in mathematics." "Jesus," Olivia muttered. "Talk about daddy issues." Emma also found an alumni magazine article about Michael's time at Phillips Exeter Academy, where he was described as intensely competitive and driven to excel at any cost. There was a mention of an incident where he was nearly expelled for hacking into the school's grading system not to change his own grades, which were perfect, but to sabotage a rival for valedictorian. Most revealing was an old profile in Wired magazine, where Michael had uncharacteristically opened up about his parents' marriage. "My father had numerous affairs," Thompson admits with surprising candor. "My mother knew, of course. Everyone knew. But she stayed. That was the arrangement." "Oh my God," Emma breathed, reading the quote. "He's becoming his father." The psychological portrait emerging was of a man shaped by a childhood where love was conditional, where vulnerability was weakness, and where maintaining appearances mattered more than emotional honesty. Michael had internalized these lessons so deeply that he couldn't even recognize what he was doing, repeating the toxic patterns of his father, unable to break the cycle. Emma incorporated these insights into her portrayal of Julian Croft, creating a character who was not just a villain, but a tragic figure, a man so terrified of emotional depth that he surrounded himself with shiny, empty things. A man who, in his desperate attempt to avoid becoming his father, had become him anyway. This added dimension transformed her manuscript. Julian wasn't just Michael, he was every man who had been taught that power was a substitute for connection, that possession was the same as love. And Eleanora's journey wasn't just about recovering from betrayal. It was about recognizing and rejecting the entire value system that had shaped their marriage. While Emma delved into the psychology of her characters, the real Michael and Vanessa were living out their romance in full public view. Despite Olivia's best efforts to shield her, Emma couldn't avoid seeing them. They were everywhere: social media, magazines, gossip sites. A spread in Vogue featured Vanessa modeling spring fashion in the penthouse that had been Emma's home. The nursery she had painted now transformed into Vanessa's walk-in closet. Michael appeared in several of the photos, looking at Vanessa with an intensity that had once been reserved for Emma. An interview in Business Insider had Michael talking about his fresh start and finding true partnership with Vanessa, who was described as an entrepreneur and model building her own lifestyle brand. There was no mention of his pregnant ex-wife or the daughter he would soon have. Most painful was the Instagram post announcing their engagement, Vanessa's hand sporting a massive diamond. The caption reading, "She said yes, forever Thompsons." The ring had belonged to Michael's grandmother, a family heirloom that he had once promised would be passed down to their daughter. Each photo, each headline was a fresh stab, but it was also material. Their public flaunting became a powerful motif in Emma's story. She wrote about Sable's insatiable hunger for the spotlight, her calculated use of social media to craft a narrative of triumph, and Julian's complicity in erasing his wife from his own history. "They're so obvious," Olivia said with disgust, scrolling through the latest batch of photos showing the couple on a yacht in St. Bart's. "They're trying way too hard to convince everyone they're happy." Emma looked at the images more clinically now. "They probably are happy, in their way," she said. "They're perfect for each other, Both of them care more about appearance than substance. But there was something else in the photos that caught Emma's trained writer's eye, a certain tension in Michael's smile that didn't reach his eyes, a possessive quality to the way Vanessa clung to him. They were performing their love story, but like any performance, there were cracks if you knew where to look. Emma's insights into Vanessa's character took an unexpected turn when she received an email from a woman named Jenna Martinez. "You don't know me," the email began, "but I used to be Vanessa Crawford's roommate in LA. I saw the news about her engagement to your ex, and I thought you should know a few things." Emma hesitated before opening the attached document. Was this a trap? Some scheme of Michael's or Vanessa's to mess with her, but curiosity won out. The document contained Jenna's account of her time living with Vanessa 4 years earlier. According to Jenna, Vanessa had been involved with a married entertainment executive named Richard Keller. He had promised to leave his wife, set Vanessa up in an expensive apartment, and introduced her to influential people in the industry. She really loved him, Jenna wrote, or at least she thought she did. When he eventually chose his family over her, she was devastated. He cut her off completely, took back the apartment, the car, everything. She ended up with massive debt and a broken heart. Most revealing was Jenna's assessment of how this experience had changed Vanessa. After Richard, something shifted in Vanessa. She became calculating, determined never to be the one left behind again. She started targeting men who could give her security, but she always kept her eyes open for someone better. "I'm not excusing what she's doing to you, it's awful. But I thought understanding her might help somehow." Emma sat back, absorbing this new information. Vanessa wasn't just a one-dimensional villain. She was a woman who had been hurt and had transformed her pain into a weapon. She had been on the other side, the one discarded for a wife, and now she was making sure she would be the winner, not the loser. This complexity presented Emma with an ethical dilemma for her book. Should she humanize Sable with this backstory, creating a more nuanced antagonist? Or would that seem like justifying Vanessa's cruelty? After much consideration, Emma chose complexity over caricature. She gave Sable a pass that echoed Vanessa's, not to excuse her actions, but to make them comprehensible. In her manuscript, Sable became not just a villain, but a tragic product of a culture that values beauty and ambition above all else. A woman who saw love as a transaction and a heart as a liability. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked when Emma shared the new direction. "After what they did to you, you're giving her depth." "I'm not writing for revenge anymore," Moa explained. "I'm writing for truth. And the truth is, people are complicated, even people who hurt us." 3 months after leaving the penthouse, Moa wrote the final words of her manuscript. She typed "the end" and stared at the screen through a blur of tears. These weren't tears of sadness, but of exhaustion and release. She had taken the ugliest period of her life and turned it into something new, something whole, something that was hers. The book was titled The Glass Penthouse. "What now?" she asked Olivia, holding the thick stack of printed pages. "Now, Mo," Olivia said with a grin. "We find a shark of our own." Olivia knew a guy who had an old college roommate who was now a literary agent. It was a long shot. The agent, James Bennett, was a legend in the publishing world, known for his discerning taste and his brutal honesty. Getting an unsolicited manuscript past his assistant was said to be harder than getting a bill through Congress. "He'll never read it," Emma said, defeated before she'd even begun. "He will if the query letter is good enough," Olivia said. "And we are going to write the best damn query letter he's ever seen." They spent a week crafting a single page. They didn't mention Emma's life story. They didn't hint at the real-life drama. They sold the book on its own merits, a gripping psychological drama about wealth, betrayal, and the quiet power of a woman underestimated. Emma sent the email with the first 50 pages attached, her heart pounding. She expected silence or a form rejection in a few months. The call came 3 days later. It was an unknown number. "Is this Emma Wilson?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes. James Bennett, I read your pages. I want to see the rest of it. Send it now." He hung up. Emma stared at the phone, then at Olivia. A slow smile spread across her face. "I told you," as she said. "I told you the pen was mightier than the sword." James Bennett was as terrifying and brilliant as his reputation suggested. After Emma emailed him the full manuscript, he called her the next day. "It's raw," he said, foregoing any pleasantries. "The pacing in the middle sags. Your dialogue is sharp, but your protagonist, Eleonora, is a little too passive in the first act. But the bones, my God, the bones are good. The voice is incredible. It's authentic. It's angry. It's marketable as hell." For the next month, Emma worked under James's exacting guidance. He was a ruthless editor, but a brilliant one. He pushed her to dig deeper, to make Eleonora's transformation more active, to sharpen the satire of the world she inhabited. He forced her to cut passages she loved and expand on moments she had skimmed over. Every edit made the book stronger, more potent. It was grueling, intensive work, a welcome distraction from the slow, painful grind of the divorce proceedings. During that time, Emma felt the first real, undeniable movements of her daughter, her kicks becoming powerful thumps and rolls. She was a constant, comforting presence, a reminder of what Emma was fighting for. Her world had shrunk to Olivia's apartment, her laptop, and her growing belly. It was a small world, but it was safe, and for the first time in a long time, it was hers. But just as Emma thought she had found her footing, a new crisis emerged. James called with concerning news. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "I've been getting some pushback from publishers about potential legal issues with your manuscript." "What kind of legal issues?" Emma asked, her stomach dropping. "Defamation, invasion of privacy. Even with the names changed, the parallels to your ex-husband are obvious to anyone in the know. His lawyers could tie the book up in court for years." "But it's fiction," Emma protested. "I changed all the names, the company, the details." "Fiction based clearly on real people," James countered. "Look, I believe in this book, but we need to be strategic. We might need to change more elements, disguise the characters further." Emma felt a wave of despair. She would have to dilute her truth, soften her story, all because Michael still had the power to silence her. "I'll think about it," she told James, but after hanging up, she broke down in tears. "He's going to win again," she sobbed to Olivia. "Even when I try to take control of my own story, he finds a way to shut me down." Olivia sat beside her on the futon, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe not," she said slowly. "Maybe there's another way to look at this." "What do you mean?" "If publishers are worried about legal issues, it means they think the book is powerful enough to threaten him. That's not weakness, that's strength." The next day, Emma received more distressing news. Rachel Morgan called to inform her that Michael's legal team had made a new demand. They wanted Emma to sign a broad non-disclosure agreement covering all aspects of their marriage as part of the divorce settlement. "It's clearly a reaction to rumors about your book," Rachel explained. "They're getting nervous." "Can they do that?" Emma asked. "They can try, but here's where it gets complicated. If you sign the NDA, you might get a better financial settlement, but you'd have to shelve the book. If you refuse, they'll make the divorce as painful and protracted as possible." The pressure was mounting from all sides. Emma was now 7 months pregnant, physically uncomfortable and emotionally drained. The prospect of a lengthy legal battle while caring for a newborn was daunting. And now, even her creative outlet, the book that had saved her sanity, was under threat. That evening, Emma sat at Olivia's kitchen table, a blank piece of paper before her. She was drafting a letter to Michael, agreeing to his terms. She would sign the NDA, accept whatever settlement he offered, and abandon the book. She was tired of fighting. She just wanted peace for herself and her daughter. Her hand hovered over the paper, pen poised to surrender, but before she could write the first word, her eyes fell on her manuscript sitting on the counter. She set down the pen, walked up the pages instead, flipping through them, reading passages at random. Eleanor realized that the most dangerous prison wasn't the glass penthouse with its perfect views and hollow luxury. It was the prison she had built in her own mind, the one where she believed she needed his approval to exist. his permission to speak her truth. Her own words stared back at her, challenging her. Was she really going to silence herself again? Trade her voice for comfort and security? Emma put down the manuscript and tore up the blank paper. No, she would not surrender her story. Not this time. She called Rachel. Tell Michael's lawyers I'm not signing any NDA. They can drag out the divorce as long as they want. I'm not giving up my right to tell my story. Next, she called James. I'm not changing the book to protect Michael Thompson's reputation, she said firmly. If mainstream publishers are too afraid of his lawyers, then we'll find another way. But I'm not watering down my truth. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then James chuckled, a sound like gravel underfoot. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Defiance suits you. Emma Wilson. What do you mean? I mean, I've been testing your resolve. The legal concerns are real, but not insurmountable. I needed to know if you had the spine to stand by your work when things got tough. Clearly, you do. Emma felt a surge of indignation, quickly followed by grudging respect. James had manipulated her, but he'd also helped her discover her own strength. So what's the real plan, she asked. The real plan is to create a bidding war. I've got 5 editors who are already interested. Legal concerns be damned. They smell a bestseller. And in publishing, that trumps almost everything. When James said he was creating a bidding war, Emma had pictured a conference room of editors politely raising their hands to offer modest sums. The reality was far more dramatic. It began with a preemptive offer from Riverhead Books, an aggressive bid designed to take the book off the table before it could go to a full auction. The editor, a sharp woman named Sarah Reynolds, called Emma personally. Emma, I haven't been able to stop thinking about The Glass Penthouse since I read it, she gushed. It's more than a domestic thriller. It's a profound social commentary. We want to make this our lead fiction title for the fall. The offer was substantial, not Michael Thompson money, but more than Emma had ever seen in her life. It was enough to secure her future and her daughters. James advised patience. Let's see who else comes to the table. 3 more offers followed, each higher than the last. By the end of the week, they had sparked a full-blown auction, with editors calling every few hours to increase their bids. The final deal, with Riverhead Books still the victor, was 3 times the initial offer and included a 2-book contract. Emma signed the contract on Olivia's cluttered kitchen table using the same fountain pen she had used to write the first words in her notebook. When it was done, Olivia popped a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne, and they toasted, laughing until they cried. To Eleonora, Olivia said, raising her glass. To getting the poison out, Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. The first person Emma called after Olivia was her lawyer, Rachel Morgan. She explained the situation, the book deal, the title, the content. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emma, Rachel finally said, her voice laced with something that sounded like awe. You are a genius. This changes everything. How so? Michael and his shark Peters have been stonewalling us on his full financial disclosure. They're hiding assets, I'm sure of it. They're painting you as this fragile, dependent woman who can't survive without him. A book deal of this magnitude, for a book with this particular subject matter. It's a grenade thrown into their strategy. Rachel's plan was audacious. They wouldn't mention the book's contents directly. Instead, they would use Emma's newfound financial independence as leverage. In their next filing, they formally withdrew Emma's request for spousal support. We are stating, Rachel explained, a predatory glee in her tone, that Ms. Wilson has secured her own financial future through her considerable talents and has no need of Mr. Thompson's support. It will drive them insane. They'll want to know how. They'll dig. And when they find out what the book is about, they will panic. She was right, and 2 days after their filing, Rachel received a frantic call from Bradley Peters. The condescending tone was gone, replaced by strained urgency. A new settlement offer was on the table. It was 5 times the original amount. We reject it, Rachel told Emma coolly. We wait. Let them sweat. Emma's due date was approaching. The stress of the legal battle and the excitement of the book deal were taking a toll. Olivia was a rock, making sure Emma was eating, sleeping, and not obsessing over legal documents. One rainy afternoon in early December, the buzzer to Olivia's apartment rang. Olivia answered, then turned to Emma with an odd expression. "It's Michael's parents," she said. "They want to talk to you." Emma froze. She hadn't seen Dr. and Mrs. Thompson since the separation. They had always been polite to her, but their loyalty was unquestionably to their son. "Should I tell them to go away?" Olivia asked, protective as always. Emma considered it. She was tired, her back ached, and she wasn't in the mood for a confrontation. But curiosity won out. "No, it's okay. Let them up." William Thompson and his wife Eleanor entered Olivia's apartment like explorers in an alien world, their expensive clothing and perfect posture at odds with the bohemian surroundings. Eleanor Thompson clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Dr. Thompson's eyes took in the paint-splattered floors and eclectic furniture with poorly disguised disdain. "Emma, dear," Mrs. Thompson said, stepping forward to kiss her cheek. "You look, well." Her eyes lingered on Emma's prominent belly. "Thank you for seeing us," Dr. Thompson said, his authoritative voice filling the small space. "We wanted to speak with you directly, without lawyers present." Olivia crossed her arms. "I'm staying right here." Dr. Thompson glanced at her, then nodded curtly. "As you wish, Emma. We've come about this book of yours." Emma tensed. "How do you know about that?" "Michael received a call from a friend at Riverhead." Mrs. Thompson explained. "The publishing world talks. We know about the deal, the subject matter. We're concerned," Dr. Bond Thompson continued, "not just for Michael, but for the family as a whole. The Thompson name has a certain standing in this city. A tell-all book would damage not just Michael's reputation, but all of us. It would affect charitable foundations, hospital boards, social connections." "It's fiction," Emma said, the familiar defense automatic now. Dr. Thompson waved his hand dismissively. "Fiction, memoir, the distinction won't matter to the public. They'll see it as revenge, as airing dirty laundry. It's undignified." "Undignified," Emma repeated, anger flaring. "Was it dignified when your son moved his mistress into our home while I was pregnant? Was it dignified when he froze our accounts and tried to paint me as mentally unstable?" Mrs. Thompson flinched. "We don't condone Michael's behavior," she said quietly. "What he did was wrong. But this book, it will only make things worse. For everyone, including your daughter." "Our granddaughter," Dr. Thompson added, his voice softening slightly. "Whatever has happened between you and Michael, she is still a Thompson. This scandal could follow her for years." Emma felt the weight of their words. They were appealing to her as grandparents, using her love for her daughter as leverage. It was manipulative, but not entirely wrong. Her daughter would carry the Thompson name, would one day perhaps read the book her mother had written. But then she thought of the alternative, staying silent, allowing Michael and Vanessa to control the narrative, teaching her daughter that power should never be challenged. "I'm sorry," that's all, Emma said, rising from her seat with as much dignity as her pregnant body allowed. "I understand your concerns, but this isn't about the Thompson name or legacy. This is about my daughter's future, about making sure she grows up knowing that her mother stood up for herself. The book will be published. I hope, for her sake, that you'll all find a way to make peace with that." Dr. Thompson's face hardened. "I see Michael was right about your stubbornness. Very well. Don't say we didn't try to reason with you." After they left, Olivia let out a low whistle. "Wow, so that's where Michael gets it from." "Gets what?" "The ability to make emotional blackmail sound like logical concern." Olivia squeezed her sister's shoulder. "You did good. You didn't let them intimidate you." Emma nodded, but her hand went to her belly, to her daughter. Had she made the right choice for her child? Or was she being selfish, putting her need for vindication above her daughter's future relationships with her father's family? She didn't have long to dwell on these questions. That night, her water broke, 6 weeks early. Everything that followed was a whirlwind of pain, fear, and overwhelming love. After 18 hours of labor, with Olivia holding her hand and whispering encouragement, Emma gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She had a full head of dark hair in Emma's eyes. She named her Harper. Holding her in her arms for the first time, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. All the anger, the betrayal, the bitterness, it all melted away in the face of this tiny, perfect human. She looked at her little face, her wrinkled brow, her tiny grasping fingers, and she knew that her life's purpose was right here in her arms. The revenge, the money, the success, it was all secondary. Writing the book had saved her, but Harper had healed her. A few days later, sitting in the hospital bed with Harper sleeping on her chest, Olivia handed her an iPad. "You might want to see this," she said, her voice tight. It was a gossip blog. The headline read, "Tech Titan Michael Thompson and socialite Vanessa Crawford announce engagement." There was a picture of them beaming, Vanessa flashing a diamond ring the size of a small planet. The article mentioned he was happily moving on after a quiet separation from his ex-wife. Emma looked at the picture of the smiling couple. She looked at the massive diamond. Then she looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. 6 months ago, that photo would have shattered her. Now she felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. They were celebrating an engagement built on a foundation of lies and cruelty. She was holding her entire world. She handed the iPad back to Olivia. "Good for them," she said. And to her own surprise, she meant it. Let them have their pretty picture. We have work to do. A new strength had settled in her. She was a mother now, and a mother protects her child. The fight wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about justice. It was about securing the future for the little girl who depended on her for everything. Michael Thompson and Vanessa Crawford had no idea who they were dealing with now. They weren't fighting a heartbroken wife anymore. They were fighting a mother with a book deal and a very, very good lawyer. The publishing machine moved with terrifying efficiency. Sarah Reynolds and the team at Riverhead Books saw the potential for a blockbuster and put their full weight behind The Glass Penthouse. An eerie minimalist cover was designed a stylized silhouette of a woman looking out a vast window at a glittering abstract cityscape. The marketing team crafted a campaign that carefully played in the gray area between fiction and reality, never explicitly claiming the book was based on true events, but letting readers draw their own conclusions. Emma's author photo was taken by a high-end photographer, not the soft-focused, smiling wife of a millionaire, but a serious, thoughtful woman shot in black and white. Emma Wilson, author. It felt right. 6 months after Harper was born, The Glass Penthouse was released. The initial reaction was what they'd hoped for. The literary reviews were stellar. The New York Times called it a scalpel-sharp debut and a devastating portrait of the hollowness of modern wealth. The Wall Street Journal praised its insider view of a world most of us only glimpse in magazines. It was chosen for book clubs, featured in airport bookstores, and climbed the bestseller list with a steady, relentless momentum. Sarah Reynolds called Emma regularly with updates, each more exciting than the last. "We're going back for a third printing," she reported one afternoon. "The sales numbers are exceeding all projections, and the publicity requests are flooding in Good Morning America, the Today Show, NPR. Everyone wants to talk to you." Emma had been cautious about publicity, wary of directly discussing the parallels between her book and her life. James and Sarah had coached her on how to handle the inevitable questions. "It's a work of fiction," she would say with a calm, practiced smile when asked about the similarities. "The themes of betrayal and resilience are universal. I drew from the emotional truth of what it feels like to be underestimated as a woman. But the characters and specific events are entirely my own creation." The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using the same phrase Michael had used to dismiss her concerns about his late nights and mysterious phone calls. "It's just work," he would say. Now her work was becoming a weapon more powerful than she had imagined. Motherhood and sudden success created a strange new reality for Emma. Her days were split between caring for Harper nursing, changing diapers, marveling at tiny fingers and toes, and the surreal experience of becoming a public figure. She hired a part-time nanny, a kind older woman named Marta, to help when she needed to do interviews or meetings. She and Olivia had moved out of the cramped Brooklyn apartment into a spacious three-bedroom in Park Slope. It wasn't a Manhattan penthouse, but it was bright and warm, with a small garden where Emma imagined Harper would one day play. From homeless to homeowner in less than a year, Olivia marveled as they unpacked boxes in the new place. "You're living the American dream, sis," Emma laughed, bouncing Harper on her hip. "Some dream. I didn't exactly plan it this way." "The best stories never go according to plan," Olivia said, wrapping an arm around her sister's shoulders. "That's what makes them interesting." But then something else began to happen. It started on niche book blogs and Reddit threads. Has anyone else noticed the similarities between Julian Croft's firm and Thompson Tech? One user posted, "Wait, Sable, the Instagram model who breaks up his marriage. Didn't Michael Thompson just get engaged to that model Vanessa Crawford?" Another commented. It was a slow burn, then an explosion. A journalist for a popular online media outlet, The Daily Beast, wrote a long-form investigative piece titled, "Is the Hottest Novel of the Year a True Story, Unpacking the Parallels Between the Glass Penthouse and the Life of Michael Thompson?" The article went viral. It laid out the timeline Emma's quiet disappearance from the social scene, Michael and Vanessa's sudden public debut, the timing of their engagement announcement. It quoted unnamed sources close to the couple, who confirmed details that mirrored events in the book, a disastrous Hamptons party, a corporate betrayal, a cruel dismissal of a longtime employee. Emma's fiction was being held up as a mirror to their reality, and the reflection was ugly. James called Emma as soon as the article dropped. "This is going to be big," he said. "Bigger than we anticipated. Are you ready?" "Do I have a choice?" Emma asked, watching Harper sleep in her crib, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her mother's words. "Not really. The story's out there now. Michael's team will be in damage control mode. They might try to discredit you, paint you as bitter or unstable. We need to get ahead of this." Emma had prepared for this moment. She had known that publishing the book would eventually expose the truth behind her fiction, but the reality was still daunting. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "One big interview." James said, someone respected, sympathetic but not sensationalist. Say enough to satisfy the public interest, but maintain your dignity. Don't attack Michael directly, but don't deny the parallels either. Let the book speak for itself. Emma agreed to an interview with Terry Gross on NPR's Fresh Air, a decision that surprised some in her publishing team who had pushed for more high-profile television appearances. "I don't want to be a spectacle," Emma explained to Sarah. "I want to be taken seriously as a writer." The interview was a masterclass in controlled revelation. Terry Gross was known for her thoughtful, in-depth conversations, and she approached Emma's story with sensitivity and respect. "Your novel portrays a woman finding her voice after betrayal," Gross noted. "Many readers have connected the story to your own experience. How much of yourself is in the character of Eleonora?" Emma paused before answering. "Every writer puts pieces of themselves into their characters," she said carefully. "Eleonora's journey from silence to self-expression certainly echoes my own. But what's important to me is that readers see beyond any possible autobiographical elements to the universal themes how society often expects women to be decorative rather than substantive. How economic power can be wielded as emotional control." She never mentioned Michael or Vanessa by name. She didn't need to. Her measured, thoughtful responses conveyed more than angry accusations ever could. She came across as reflective rather than vengeful, insightful rather than bitter. The interview was widely shared and praised. "Emma Wilson refuses to be a victim," read one headline. "The author who turned pain into literary gold," declared another. The storm had broken. The Glass Penthouse was no longer just a novel. It was a scandal. It rocketed to #1 on every bestseller list and stayed there. The fallout for Michael and Vanessa was catastrophic. Michael, who had meticulously curated his image as a visionary tech genius, was suddenly recast as Julian Croft, a cold, cruel, and easily manipulated man. His business partners grew wary. The stock price of Thomson Tech dipped. A major deal he'd been working on was put on indefinite hold. The mystique of Michael Thompson, the untouchable titan, was gone. He was just a garden-variety cheating husband whose dirty laundry was now a national bestseller. But the public's wrath was most fiercely directed at Vanessa. Sable was a masterpiece of subtle villainy, and the public gleefully superimposed her character onto Vanessa. Sable was vain, materialistic, cruel, and manipulative. Therefore, Vanessa must be too. Her Instagram, once a shrine to her glamorous life, became a battlefield. Every photo of her and Michael was flooded with thousands of comments quoting lines from Emma's book. They posted snake emojis, called her Sable, and accused her of being a homewrecker. The luxury brands that had paid her for sponsored posts began to quietly terminate their contracts. The invitations to A-list events dried up. The fame she had craved had arrived, but it was a twisted, monstrous version of what she'd envisioned. She wasn't an admired socialite. She was a national pariah. Emma watched it all from the quiet sanctuary of her new home. She'd see the headlines while Harper napped on her chest. She'd read the furious comments while feeding her daughter pureed carrots. It was surreal, a war being fought in a world she no longer inhabited. Rachel Morgan was ecstatic. "They're bleeding," she said over the phone. "Peters is calling me 3 times a day. Michael is desperate to make this go away. He wants to settle the divorce now. He's ready to meet all of our demands and then some. He wants a non-disclosure agreement thicker than a phone book." "Tell him I'll think about it," Emma said calmly. The power dynamic had completely inverted. Emma was no longer the powerless wife begging for scraps. She held all the cards. The book had become a more powerful weapon than any legal filing. It hadn't just attacked Michael's reputation. It had deconstructed his very identity in the public eye. One evening, Emma was in the local park with Harper, who was now crawling and determined to explore every inch of her surroundings. Emma watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and exhaustion, the continuous vigilance of motherhood still new to her. "She has your determination." Emma whirled around at the familiar voice. Vanessa Crawford stood a few feet away, looking very different from the triumphant other woman who had laughed in the penthouse. Her designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. Her makeup was minimal, her posture less commanding. Emma instinctively moved to shield Harper. "What are you doing here?" "I'm not here to cause trouble," Vanessa said, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. I wanted to talk to you about the book." Emma's guard remained up. "There's nothing to talk about. It's fiction." A ghost of Vanessa's old smirk appeared. "We both know that's not entirely true." She glanced at Harper, who was happily grabbing fistfuls of grass. "She's beautiful." "Thank you," Emma said stiffly. "Why are you really here, Vanessa?" Vanessa sighed, seeming to deflate slightly. "I want to make you an offer. Information for reconsideration." "What kind of information?" "About Michael. Things you don't know. Things that could help your case." Vanessa's eyes darted around nervously. "He's not who you think. He's not who I thought either. He's done this before. I'm not the first." Emma studied Vanessa's face, looking for signs of deception. "And what do you want in return for me to rewrite history? Paint you as the victim who... "Not exactly, but maybe in the movie version." Vanessa looked away. "I know how Hollywood works. They'll want to adapt the book. When they do, maybe Sable could be less of a villain, more complex." Imam almost laughed at the audacity. Vanessa was still thinking about her image, still calculating angles. "Why would I help you after what you did?" "Because it might help your daughter," Vanessa said quietly. "The information I have. It would ensure Michael can never hurt either of you again. but it could also destroy him completely. Is that what you want Harper to see when she's old enough to understand her father completely ruined? It was a manipulative question, but it struck a chord. Emma had been so focused on her own justice that she hadn't fully considered what victory would mean for Harper's relationship with her father. I need to think about it, Emma said finally. How do I contact you? Vanessa handed her a business card with just a phone number. I'm staying with a friend in Brooklyn. Call me if you want to talk more. As Vanessa walked away, Emma felt a strange mix of emotions. The woman who had once seemed so powerful, so threatening, now appeared almost pitiful. Whatever information she had about Michael, it was clear their perfect engagement wasn't as blissful as Instagram suggested. Later that night, after putting Harper to bed, Emma called Rachel to tell her about the encounter. It's a trap, Rachel said immediately. Don't trust her for a second. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. What if she does have valuable information? Emma asked. Then she can provide it in a deposition, under oath. Rachel replied, don't make deals with the devil. Emma, you're winning. Don't compromise now. Emma knew Rachel was probably right, and yet something about Vanessa's demeanor had seemed genuine, the desperation. Yes, but also a flicker of something like remorse. She put Vanessa's card in a drawer, undecided. Emma's indecision about Vanessa's offer became moot a week later when the gossip sites exploded with new drama. A paparazzo had captured Michael and Vanessa in a heated argument on the street outside an exclusive Manhattan restaurant. The photos told a story of a relationship in crisis. Vanessa was crying, her face a mask of rage and despair. Michael looked harried, angry, gesturing wildly. The final shot showed Vanessa throwing her engagement ring at Michael before storming off. The headlines were gleeful: Trouble in Paradise engaged couple, Michael Thompson and Vanessa Crawford in public showdown. The article quoted unnamed sources claiming the fight was about Vanessa's dwindling career prospects and Michael's reluctance to set a wedding date. The gilded cage they had built for themselves was beginning to rust from the inside out. The pressure was getting to the mom. The fairy tale was turning into a nightmare, and Vanessa wasn't laughing anymore. Rachel Morgan called Emma as soon as the photos hit the internet. The desperate always make mistakes, she said with satisfaction. This is our moment. I'm filing a motion tomorrow to compel full financial disclosure. They're vulnerable now. We push hard. Emma agreed, but found herself feeling strangely hollow about this new development. There was no satisfaction in watching their relationship crumble, no vindication in seeing Vanessa reduced to tears on a public street. It felt like watching the inevitable conclusion of a Greek tragedy, predictable and ultimately meaningless. She was surprised to realize she had moved beyond wanting revenge. She had built something new from the ashes of her marriage: a career, a home for her daughter, an identity separate from being Michael Thompson's wife. That was victory enough. A week after the public argument, Emma's doorman buzzed up. Ms. Wilson, there's a Mr. Michael Thompson in the lobby. He says it's urgent. Emma's blood ran cold. He had never been to her new home. He didn't even know where it was until now. He must have had a private investigator find her. Tell him I'm not seeing anyone, she said, her voice firmer than she felt. He says he's not leaving until you talk to him. Emma took a deep breath, looking at Harper, sleeping soundly in her crib. This was her home, her safe space. She would not let him intimidate her here. Fine, she told the doorman. Send him up, but stay by the elevator. When she opened the door, the man standing in her hallway was a ghost of the Titan she once knew. His expensive suit was rumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a tense, desperate energy. Emma, he said, his voice hoarse. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Michael, you should speak to my lawyer. Please, he said, and the word was so foreign on his lips that it startled her. Just 5 minutes. This book, this thing you've done, it's destroying my life. My book is a work of fiction, she said, repeating the mantra. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Don't play games, Emma. You know exactly what you've done. You've painted a target on my back. My business is suffering. My life is a circus. Your life became a circus the moment you brought that woman into our home, she retorted, her own anger flaring. You made your choices. These are the consequences. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it gave Emma an unexpected pang of nostalgia for the man she had once loved. What do you want? He asked, his voice dropping. Is it more money? Name your price. I'll give you anything. Just make this stop. Sign an NDA. Release a statement saying it's all a coincidence. So, anything. It was the ultimate transactional offer from a man who only understood transactions. He thought he could buy his way out of the truth. He thought he could buy her silence. The old Emma might have been tempted by the security. The new Emma felt only contempt. You don't get it, do you? She said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. This was never about money. This was about you throwing me away like I was nothing. It was about your mistress laughing at me while my world fell apart. You can't put a price on that. Michael, you can't buy back my dignity. I had to build it myself. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time, perhaps ever. He wasn't seeing the quiet, accommodating wife. He was seeing a stranger, a woman who had found her own power, and it terrified him. So that's it, he said, his voice cracking. You're just going to let it all burn down. I didn't light the fire, Michael. I just wrote about the ashes. From inside the apartment, Harper let out a small cry as she began to wake from her nap. The sound broke the spell. You need to leave, Emma said, her voice softening slightly. This man was her daughter's father. After all, however pathetic he had become. Goodbye, Michael. She closed the door on his shocked face, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. It was over. She had faced him, and she hadn't flinched. But the story had one more twist. And it came not from Michael, but from Vanessa, driven to the brink by the public shaming and the crumbling of her dream life. Vanessa made a final desperate play. 2 days after Michael's visit, she did the one thing no one expected. She went on the offensive. She hired a high-profile, notoriously aggressive lawyer and filed a lawsuit against Emma and her publisher for defamation and libel. Her claim was that the glass penthouse had maliciously and intentionally ruined her reputation, and that the character of Sable was a direct, false, and damaging caricature of her. It was a bold, reckless move. Rachel Morgan was practically giddy when she called Emma. She's handed us the gun to shoot herself with, she said. This is the best thing that could have happened. How, Emma asked, panicked. A lawsuit, a trial. I don't want to go through that. We won't have to, Rachel said. In a defamation case, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove that what you wrote was false and that it caused her harm. To do that, she has to submit to a deposition under oath. She will have to answer questions about her relationship with Michael, about the timeline, about what happened the night you left. Rachel paused for dramatic effect. And more importantly, to prove damages. She will have to open up her entire life, her finances, her communications, everything to discovery. She has no idea the hornet's nest she just kicked. The deposition was scheduled. Vanessa, coached by her lawyer, was arrogant and defiant. She portrayed herself as the victim of a jealous, vengeful ex-wife. She denied the book's depiction of her as manipulative or cruel. Rachel, calm and methodical, led her through the timeline of her relationship with Michael. Ms. Crawford, Rachel asked coolly, when did your romantic relationship with Mr. Thompson begin? About a year ago, Vanessa lied, trying to create a narrative where the marriage was already over. So it did not begin while he was still married to and living with my client, Emma Wilson. Their marriage was a sham. It was over long before I came along, Vanessa insisted. So you feel your actions were justified? I fell in love, she said, trying to sound noble. He was trapped in a miserable, loveless marriage. I rescued him. Then Rachel pivoted. Ms. Crawford, you claim the book has caused you financial harm. Can you describe your financial situation prior to meeting Mr. Thompson? Vanessa's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him, explaining the questions were relevant to proving damages. Flustered, Vanessa was forced to admit her income was sporadic, based on influencer contracts, and that she had significant debt. Then came the masterstroke. Rachel produced bank records obtained through discovery, showing massive regular cash transfers from a holding company owned by Michael into Vanessa's account starting nearly 2 years prior, long before her claimed timeline. Ms. Crawford, Rachel said, sliding the statements across the table. Can you explain these payments from Mr. Thompson, which began while he was, by all accounts, happily married? Vanessa stared at the papers, her face draining of color. She stammered. She floundered. Her lies were unraveling under the harsh light of legal scrutiny, but it was her final act of desperation that brought the entire house of cards down. In a heated exchange, trying to paint Michael as a man who controlled everything, she blurted out something she thought would save her. "He was always so paranoid," she exclaimed, her voice shrill. "Worried about audits, moving money between shell companies. He even bragged to me about how he funneled funds from the last Thompson Tech acquisition to avoid taxes. He controlled everything. I was just along for the ride." There was a dead silence in the room. Vanessa's own lawyer put his head in his hands. She had just, under oath, in a desperate attempt to portray herself as a pawn, admitted to witnessing and having knowledge of felony tax evasion and securities fraud. The defamation suit was dropped the next day, but it was too late. The deposition transcript was leaked. Within a week, the SEC and the IRS announced formal investigations into Michael Thompson and Thompson Tech. Vanessa's attempt to ruin Emma had not only failed, it had utterly destroyed the man she had attached herself to. In her desperation to escape the shadow of a fictional character, she had become the architect of her own and her lover's real-world demise. It was a twist so poetic, so perfectly ironic, that even Emma couldn't have written it better. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The federal investigation into Michael Thompson was the kill shot to his already wounded empire. His board of directors forced him to resign as CEO. His assets were frozen pending the investigation. The man who had stood at the pinnacle of the financial world was now a pariah facing the very real possibility of prison time. His engagement to Vanessa was quietly called off, left with no money, no reputation, and potential legal exposure of her own. She vanished from the public eye as quickly as she had appeared. Emma's divorce was finalized not with a bang, but with a whimper. Michael, humbled and broken, agreed to every one of Rachel's terms. The settlement was substantial, securing Harper's future tenfold. But the true victory wasn't the money. It was the knowledge that Emma had won on her own terms, with her own strength. The NDA he had so desperately wanted was off the table. Emma was free to tell her story, and she already had. Life found a new, beautiful normal. Emma's days were filled with the simple joys of motherhood. Harper's first steps, her first words, her infectious giggle that was the polar opposite of Vanessa's cruel laugh. The glass penthouse stayed on the bestseller list for over a year, becoming a cultural touchstone. Emma started working on a second novel, this one not about pain and revenge, but about resilience and finding love after loss. About a year after the divorce was final, Emma got a call from her agent, James Bennett. "Are you sitting down?" he asked, a rare note of excitement in his gruff voice. "I am now. What's going on?" "Nathan Blackwood's office called." Emma gasped. Nathan Blackwood was one of the most respected and successful film producers in Hollywood, known for smart, character-driven dramas that always ended up at the Academy Awards. He read the book. He loved it. He wants to meet. He's flying to New York next week. The meeting took place in a lavish suite at the Carlisle Hotel. Nathan Blackwood was exactly as Emma had imagined, charismatic, intelligent, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. He didn't talk about the scandal or the real-life parallels. He talked about the characters. He spoke about Eleanora's journey, her quiet strength, her transformation. "What you wrote, Emma," he said, leaning forward, is a timeless story about a woman finding her voice. It's a doll's house for the modern age. I want to put it on screen. We're thinking of approaching Kate Blanchett for the role of Eleonora. Emma was speechless. Kate Blanchett, a real film. But amid the excitement, a worry nagged at her. What about Harper? She asked. I don't want to expose her to more publicity, more scandal. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. I understand your concern. The film will be based on your book, which is already a matter of public record. We're not looking to sensationalize or create new controversies. This is about the art, the story itself. But I can promise you creative control. Nothing gets greenlit without your approval. Emma considered his words. The book was already out there. The film would reach a different audience, maybe even help other women in similar situations feel less alone. And the creative control was crucial. She could ensure the story was told with dignity and depth. I'll need to think about it, she said, and discuss it with my lawyer. Nathan smiled. Of course, take all the time you need. The negotiations took a few weeks. Rachel and James both advised her to accept the offer, which was generous by any standard. Rachel, practical as always, pointed out that the money would ensure Harper's education and future security. James argued that the film would cement Emma's literary reputation and expand her audience exponentially. In the end, what convinced Emma was a conversation with Olivia. Remember why you wrote the book in the first place? Her sister said. Not just for revenge, but to reclaim your story, to transform your pain into something meaningful. The film is another step in that transformation. Emma signed the contract. The day she signed the film rights deal was a bright, clear spring day. She met Rachel at her office. The contracts were spread across a large mahogany table. Emma picked up the pen, a beautiful, heavy fountain pen Rachel had gifted her. As she held the pen over the signature line, her mind flashed back to that night in the penthouse. She could almost hear it, the echo of Vanessa's sharp, cruel laughter, the sound that had been meant to break her. She had laughed as Emma, a pregnant, heartbroken woman, packed her bags with her life in ruins. She thought she was watching the end of Emma's story, and now here Emma was. In her purse was a picture of her beautiful daughter, Harper. In the bank was the money from her best-selling novel and her divorce settlement, securing their future. And in her hand was a pen poised to sign a deal that would turn her story into a film for millions to see. Vanessa was gone, a footnote in a scandal of her own making. Michael was a fallen titan, a cautionary tale. And Emma, she was Emma Wilson, a mother, an author, the writer of her own story from the first word to the last. She looked at Rachel, who gave her a small, proud nod. She took a breath, and with a steady hand, she signed her name. There was no grand flourish, no triumphant cheer. There was only a quiet, profound sense of peace. The laughter had long since faded. The only sound in the room was the gentle scratch of a pen on paper, writing the perfect final chapter. Epilogue 3 years later. The red carpet premiere of The Glass Penthouse was a surreal experience for Emma. The novel that had begun as therapy in Olivia's paint-splattered spare room was now a major motion picture starring Kate Blanchett and directed by an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. Emma walked the carpet in an elegant midnight blue gown. Olivia by her side. Reporters called her name. Photographers' flashes popped like lightning. She answered questions with the practiced ease she had developed over the years, deflecting the more intrusive ones with grace. How does it feel to see your story on the big screen? One reporter asked. Surreal. Emma replied honestly. But wonderful. The film, like the book, is ultimately about resilience and finding your voice. I hope it resonates with anyone who has ever felt silenced or underestimated. The film received a standing ovation at its premiere. Early reviews were glowing, with many critics predicting Oscar nominations. Emma watched it all with a sense of detachment, as if observing someone else's life unfold. The events that had inspired the story seemed distant now, belonging to another person in another lifetime. After the premiere, at the exclusive after-party, Emma stepped out onto a balcony for a moment of quiet. The New York skyline glittered before her, not unlike the view from the penthouse she had once called home. A familiar voice spoke behind her. "Congratulations. It's a triumph." Emma turned to see Vanessa Crawford standing there. She looked different, older, soberer, the glossy perfection replaced by something more authentic. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in an understated ponytail. "Vanessa," Emma said, surprised but not alarmed. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I wasn't invited," Vanessa admitted with a small smile. "I'm working for the catering company, part of my community service arrangement with the SEC." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Community service? In exchange for testimony against Michael?" "Turned out I knew more than I realized about his financial irregularities." Emma nodded. She had heard that Michael had taken a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. He was serving 2 years in a minimum security prison for tax evasion and securities fraud. "How is he?" Emma asked, surprising herself with the question. Vanessa shrugged. "I wouldn't know. We haven't spoken since everything fell apart." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. What we did to you was cruel. I was not in a good place. But that's no excuse." Emma studied the woman who had once seemed so threatening, so powerful. Now she just looked tired, a little sane, and very human. "Thank you for saying that," Emma said simply. Vanessa glanced back toward the party. "I should get back to work. I just wanted to say congratulations. And that Kate Blanchett was too kind to Sable. I was much worse." She turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. You were right, in the book, about why I did what I did. The man who left me for his wife, how it broke something in me." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "You saw me more clearly than I saw myself." As Vanessa walked away, Emma felt the final piece of a long puzzle click into place. The closure she hadn't known she was still seeking had arrived in the most unexpected form. Back at home later that night, Emma checked on Harper, now a spirited 4-year-old with her mother's eyes and her father's quick mind. She was sleeping peacefully, surrounded by stuffed animals, her favorite books stacked beside her bed. Emma kissed her daughter's forehead gently, then went to her study. On her desk sat a framed copy of The Glass Penthouse, alongside the manuscript of her third novel, nearly complete. Beside them was a silver-framed photo of her and Harper in the small garden of their home, both laughing at something outside the frame. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. There was an email from Michael, one of his monthly updates about his progress in therapy and his plans for when he was released. Despite everything, Emma had agreed to allow him supervised visits with Harper once he was out, not for his sake, but for Harper's. Every child deserved to know both parents, even if one was deeply flawed. Emma typed a brief, polite response, updating him on Harper's latest achievements, her precocious reading ability, her newfound interest in painting, clearly influenced by Aunt Olivia. She attached a recent photo of Harper at the park. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. Emma would never forget the pain he had caused, but it was something like peace, the knowledge that Michael Thompson no longer had the power to hurt her, that she had rebuilt her life stronger than before, that the cruel laughter that had once echoed through a marble-floored penthouse had been silenced by the quiet scratch of a pen on paper. Emma closed her laptop and looked out the window at the Brooklyn street below. Life continued its messy, beautiful flow. Tomorrow, she would wake up early to finish a chapter before Harper rose. They would have breakfast together, then walk to the local playground. In the afternoon, she had a call with her publisher about the marketing plan for her new book. It was an ordinary life in many ways, but it was hers. She had written it herself, word by word, choice by choice, day by day. And that was the greatest triumph of all.